sometime in the distant future. We see them now in our own region, from drought conditions in eastern Washington in agricultural communities to flooding and changing weather patterns right here in western Washington. Around the world, challenges involving water, food security, health, and economic stability are often deeply connected to environmental conditions. That's one reason this conversation fits so naturally with our mission. Rotary has always been willing to take on large and complemented challenges like disease eradication and clean water, literacy, peace building, um, not because these issues are easy, but because they're important. Many of you already know our speaker today. He brings both a global perspective and decades of firsthand experience on this topic. Dave Spicer is the chair of the Environmental Sustainability Committee for Rotary District 5030, which is our district. And it serves around roughly 50 clubs throughout our region. Dave has been a Rotarian for more than 40 years and has participated in 57 water projects and humanitarian aid trips around the world, witnessing firsthand the ways environmental conditions affect health, opportunity, and the resilience of our communities. Professionally, he has also spent decades in nonprofit and community leadership, helping organizations and individuals create stronger futures. And on a personal note, I have to tell you that Dave is also a Leadership Tomorrow graduate, class of 93. So please join me in welcoming Dave Spicer.
Jan, thank you. And I love that year, 1992, 93. You were a terrific ED. It was so stimulating. So I know Tracy Brown, who's a recent member of your club, was with me that year. And I think she's now currently the founder of the Healthy Smart Homes. And I met with her for coffee a couple weeks back. So great to be here. And I do want to shout out to both Kathy Gibson and Eric Christensen, who are on the district ESC, for helping to invite me to be here today. So great to be here. And Mary, you'll be controlling the slides. So let's shift to the first one.
Good to see you, Dave. It's Tracy.
Hi Tracy, good to hear your voice. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So what I'm going to share today is you have all heard different parts of climate change. What my goal is to try to pull all the dots together to give us a perspective on how serious climate change is. It's very serious in our own region as well as around the world. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a lot of key points. We've heard about CO2, what that really is, oil and gas and coal that creates the CO2. Then there's methane gas. Methane gas is actually, depending on the studies you see, 20 to 80 times more powerful than CO2 gases. And that comes from natural gas, from agricultural farms, from feedlots, even from just a variety of other sources. So all of this together creates CO2 in our atmosphere, which is having huge impact on our climate. Slide. Next slide, Mary. So the International Panel on Climate Change, that's IPCC, they do a yearly report. And I want to just share some of the findings. The last 10 years have been the hottest on the planet. They have been recording the temperatures since the 1850s and 1860s, so we have 160 years of data. 2 years ago, 2024 was the hottest year on record. And we are in a period of the planet where it's just going to continue to heat up. You see my reference to 1.5. 10 years ago, 2016, there were the Paris Accords. You probably have all heard about that. And 198 countries, including ours, came together to Paris to try to come up with some systems analysis. And they determined that it was critical that we keep the temperatures increase below 2.0. And that means 2.0 be below pre-industrial levels. And the goal has really been try to keep below 1.5. And what happens, we're already seeing some sea level rise. We're seeing water scarcity or flooding going on in our area, around the country, around the world. We're seeing more and more extreme weather events, more coral bleaching. We're seeing ocean acidity. We're seeing all these things now. But as we go beyond 1.5, exponentially, all of those continue to worsen and are very seriously aggravating. It's no question. We have incredible science evolving it. Next slide. Here's a cartoon by David Horsey, and I just have it added it because it kind of creates a likeness. This is somebody wanting to ski in Snoqualmie Pass, but we're not getting as much snow as we used to, so he wishes he would have been water skiing. And we are actually running into a lot of changes in our climate affecting the snowpass. So next slide. Now I want to identify a number of things that are happening. They're already started to happen around the world. More and more severe hurricanes. Now, we've always had hurricanes. We've had class 4 and class 5 going back 100 years. We have all kinds of data. But what we're seeing is more class 4 and more class 5 hurricanes hitting around the region and around the world. Um, and we had a huge one back in 2005 with Katrina. It really leveled New Orleans. And those parts of Louisiana and that part of the country are going to be more and more impacted. Next slide. Tornadoes. Again, we've had tornadoes for centuries, but we're getting more killer tornadoes, what they call F4 and F5 tornadoes. Those are the most extreme. An F4 and F5 is over 180 miles per hour. And some of the the reach geographically is getting bigger and bigger. We're seeing more and more deaths. So again, we might not have severe tornadoes this current year, but the trend is more and more severe extreme tornadoes. Next slide. California fires. We all watched, just it was horrifying to see what was happening in California. There were two major fires. There were several, but there were two major ones. One was the Palisades fire and the other was the Eaton fire. And it started around January 7th and went to about the end of January before they were really contained. So just imagine this in LA. There were over 16,000 structures, that's houses and homes and infrastructure that were burned, destroyed. There were 29 people who were killed. There were hundreds more who were affected by all of the heat and the problems with respiratory illnesses. There were many, many hundreds more. They believe there were far more deaths than the 29, but it's kind of subjective question. But these fires are going to be more and more severe in our area too. We've had some terrible fires in Washington state, but that was a wake-up call because the cost to try to deal with that fire and then the aftermath, billions and billions of dollars were cost. Next slide. Now we don't hear a lot about it unless you pay a lot of attention to science. I go back when I was at Dartmouth College. I took several courses in environment and science, and I followed ever since then. Uh, they've been talking about Antarctica and Greenland for 4 to 5 decades. The melt the last 20 years is at an astronomical level. This is really worth noting because there is something called the Thwaites Glacier, Thwaites. It's a huge ice sheet in Antarctica. Scientists believe it could break off and melt. They don't know if it'll be 10 years or 100 years, but it is going to happen unless we dramatically change our CO2 in the atmosphere. And that single ice sheet, which is huge, it's the size of Maine and Massachusetts together, could create 8 feet ocean increase. And that's in Antarctica. Greenland, as well, as accelerating a major melt. And if both of these melt, which if it happens, we could be talking 100 to 200 years from now, we're talking 20 to 30 feet. Just imagine that for a second. Let's say it's not even that much. Let's say it's 5 to 6 feet in the next 50 or 100 years. Every coastal city and town will have a huge issue. And retaining walls may not be high enough. And we don't have the will to create the infrastructure to deal with it, at least not now. But that is a huge issue that's coming. Next slide, Mary. Now, we're seeing more and more extreme heat. We're watching it happen right now in Europe. I have friends who are on a Rick Steves trip. They have a 90 to 95 degrees in England. Very unusual, that kind of heat. Um, so what you're looking at right here is, of course, the United States, and the strong red colors are in the Midwest. Those are going to be the biggest temperature regions. I grew up in northern Minnesota. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, the Dakotas are looking at the biggest heat change. The hottest days, and that's defined according to this map, I think it's like over 90 degrees, is in the southeast. We're relatively unscathed, but don't forget, 2021, we had a heat wave that lasted about 3 to 4 days, and Seattle got up to 108 degrees, and the hottest days in eastern Washington were 119 degrees. So we will have extreme heat in Seattle, but fortunately, we will probably not have what other parts of the country have, but we will have waves of it that may last. They have what they call these heat domes, and if a heat dome hits our area, we will have high 90s into low hundreds again. It's not a question of if, it's just how often will it happen. So next slide. This is another important factor, coral reefs after and before bleaching. What happens is the oceans are warming up, and it's really affecting coral reefs. There's a lot of worry by scientists that coral reefs, 50% of them may be severely damaged or bleached and dead within the next 25 years. I hope that doesn't happen, because what that means is a lot of marine life, 25% of all marine life emanates from these coral reefs. You are looking at a coral reef in an area of the Caribbean on the right that looked like that 5 years ago, and on the left it's dead. So it's happening before our eyes. Let's go to the next slide. So what's happening in Washington State? Again, we are aware of this generally, but there are four major categories of concern. One is the ocean acidity. Again, what's happening, the water temperatures are going up, the pH is reducing, and it's having an impact on marine life. It's really having an impact on the oyster beds in our part of the world. It's actually accelerating faster in our area than other parts of the world. Fires. We all know we're getting less snowpack in the Olympics and the Cascades. We're having snow melting earlier, and we're just going to see more and more trend upward of fires. They may be small fires, they may be large fires. A town on the outskirts of our city is North Bend. North Bend is a great risk for a major burn, which could be catastrophic. And what's happening is, it's just going to require more and more responders and more costs, and it's a tinder. Water scarcity. We're seeing that happen right now with the low snowpack. We're in the fourth year of a drought. Who would have thought 20 years ago that Washington and Seattle would have severe droughts? It's due to low snowpack, and we're getting flooding, but the flooding is actually not being contained in the reservoirs. It's such a, these are major floods that are happening. Back in December, between like December 8th and 9th and December, I think, 19th, we had a huge amount of water. We had 100,000 people have to be evacuated. We had several thousand homes destroyed or partially destroyed. So it was a significant flooding event. The last major flooding event was back in the 50s. So we'll see more flooding. So these four things are already happening and will get worse in the future. That's a reality. We just need to prepare for it. We have to adapt for it. Next slide, Mary. So I've just been talking about, extreme weather kind of things, extreme storms and fire and all the acidity and all of that. Well, we also have impact on property damage. An extreme weather event is one where there's damage of $1 billion or more related to that event. It could be a tornado, a hurricane, a fire. In 2024, we had 27 extreme weather events, over $180 billion. Last year with California, just that one major fire event, there were three or four fires, but major fires destroyed over 16,000 structures and 165 billion. The year before, 27 storms or weather events caused 180 billion. Last year, California alone with the fires was almost that much. And what's happening? I have a wonderful cabin over in near Lake Wenatchee. We're having huge problems the last couple of years getting coverage for insurance for fire. And insurance companies, they're in the business of making money. I don't blame them. I own a couple of businesses myself, and they're pulling out of states where there are major hurricanes, tornadoes, and fires. And there's several states, Florida, California, Louisiana, Arizona, North Carolina, Oregon. We're going to be experiencing it. It's a big challenge. And a lot of people living in hurricane areas or tornado, they're going without insurance. Same thing with California. There's going to be a system, there has to be a system to create insurance. It probably will be state or federally funded, but it's a big, big issue. Next slide, Mary. So public health, again, huge impact. It's not necessarily real top of mind, but remember when we had that 3 or 4 days of intense heat, there were over 1,000 people who were hospitalized for respiratory illnesses. These are people primarily who had asthma, heart issues, but a lot of people were hospitalized. So we're going to see more of that, heat stroke, skin cancers. In some areas of the world, we're going to see real increase in malaria and typhus, other infectious diseases. My daughter is a therapist down in Los Angeles. There's a new diagnosis dealing with mental health, and it's called climate trauma. There are young people who are in their teens and 20s who are so traumatized by what's happening with the environment locally and globally that they are extremely anxious. And there's now that diagnosis of climate trauma, great worry. So, and there are costs that will be affiliated with the impact on public health. I think WHO, the World Health Organization, is very conservative about 10 to 12 billion dollars. I think it's going to be much potentially much, much greater, much greater. Next slide. So let's talk about the water crisis in Mexico and US. There have been severe droughts just to the south of the United States in Mexico City. 2 years ago, they were near collapse of water. They were trucking in water for several million people. Just imagine that. In Indian cities, there are over 100 cities. I just checked this about half an hour ago. There are over 100 cities in India that now require trucked water in. Part of what's happening, the Himalaya, the glaciers are melting so significantly that the water for the Indus River is dramatically being depleted. So 100 major cities, and these are cities that are well over 1 million people per city that require trucked water. We're in a mega drought. That's what climate scientists call the area in the Southwest. I don't know how they come back to 1000 AD, but they believe it's been 1,000 years, it's been hundreds of years, no matter what. And what's happening, Lake Mead and Lake Powell are significantly diminished. So it's causing problem with the water for agriculture and industry and residential, but it's also hydropower. It may be impacted significantly, and that'll be a big energy issue. We're in our fourth state of a major drought, and and we had this major flooding in November and December, but we really need to have a snowpack, and the snowpack is down about 45% this year. Last year, the same thing. And we will see restrictions on water, maybe watering lawns or whatever, but they're going to be taking effect. Right now, there are places and counties in eastern Washington that have stopped the gap for 10 days in a couple of counties because there's having to have water restrictions. So some of these orchards are having to hold off on water. It's a huge issue. Okay, next one. You don't think about this, but aquifers are not being replenished, and 90% of all utilities in the United States depend on water consumption from aquifers. And climate change is reducing the rainfall levels, the snow melt, river flows are decreasing, and the aquifers are not getting replenished. A huge user of water is industry, but agriculture is the biggest one, and that's having to be very careful. And what happens is the crop prices are going to go up. They have to be careful what they actually plant in their fields. And more than half of all aquifers in the United States are being over pumped. The biggest aquifer in the United States is called the Ogallala Aquifer. It goes through the Midwest, and it is significantly depleted. They do not know how long it may last. It might be another 20 years, it might be 50 years, but it's not getting replenished. And it's going to be a huge, many states depend on that aquifer. So next slide. So we're now at about 1.5. The hope had been that we could put that off, but we've been having 1.5 the last 2 years globally. So what happens if we reach 3.0? And the hope is, of course, that we will have the technologies to pull out the CO2 out of the atmosphere. They'll be able to do enough things in technology to put that off. But if we did reach 3.0, the most conservative estimates that I can find is oceans would rise 1 to 3 feet. The more liberal, more concerned ones are 8 to 10 feet when we hit 3.0. That's a big issue. Extreme heat waves over 120 degrees in certain parts of our country, probably around the world. More severe hurricanes, more scarcity of water, fires of a super intensity. The polar ice caps, ice sheets could melt. More and more severe ocean acidification, disease proliferation. All of these things will be a magnitude of several times what they are right now. And if any of us have children or grandchildren, this is a big issue to be concerned about because we're not talking 1,000 years from now. We could be talking a couple 100 years from now. But unless we change the trajectory, uh, we may not hit 3.0, but we could easily hit 2 and 2.5. And it's anybody's guess after that. Next slide. So I've talked kind of in sobering terms because the reality is, and the truth is, these are very concerning trends that are very, very worrisome. But I want to hit on positive things, and there are some really positive trends that are happening around the world. Globally, the renewables, the wind power, water, hydropower, uh, nuclear power actually can be quite good. There are a whole number of renewables that are now exceeding coal use and other natural gas. China is building a lot of coal producing plants, but the number one producer in the world of solar and wind power in the world. India is another major, they're doing some major work reducing plastic, greening their railway systems, electrifying their transit systems. There are now 7 countries that are over 100% renewables, and Europe has also focused on decarbonizing, better energy efficiency, and renewables. So these are all positive trends that are happening around the world, largely because of the Paris Accords and the following up after that. Next slide. So what's happening in the United States that's positive? Well, there are utilities around the country that have adopted a policy of trying to reduce to zero the carbon use of energy. And interestingly, Seattle City Light in our backyard has been zero carbon since 2005, so 20 years or so. And we use a lot of renewables, 88%. A lot of it's hydropower, but also solar and wind and nuclear. There's actually only one nuclear power plant that's active, but there's a lot of conversation about should we consider bringing back more nuclear power. There's a lot of controversy, but there could be some interesting conversations in that way. At the federal level, under the Biden administration, they passed the Inflation Reduction Climate Act, huge incentives for the renewable energy automobile industry. It's being challenged by the current administration, but there's still really good things happening. A lot of businesses, a lot of universities, a lot of cities, a lot of tribes, interestingly, are working to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. And it's really having a major impact. Texas, which you wouldn't think, it's the leader in the country on using wind power and uses more wind power than fossil fuels, coal, for example. And in other states, Iowa, Kansas, South Dakota, they're also using renewables. Montana Supreme Court, coal country. The Supreme Court ruled that there was a constitutional right to a clean environment. It came down about 2 years ago. No one thought that would happen, but it was brought by a group of high school and college kids who said, we want to have a guarantee that as future permitting, there has to be impact on what kind of impact certain fossil fuel industry will have on the climate. And in Washington State, we are one of the two leaders. Probably California and Washington State are doing a lot. We have legislation trying to cap the fossil fuel industry in a kind of a slow pattern, basically trying to keep the fossil fuel industry reducing its uh, emissions of fossil fuels. And there's fees on top of if they can't hit certain gradations. So that's coming. They have a mass transit system that we hope to have in hopefully 9 years, 10 years by 2035. all mass transit will be by electric energy. So we are doing some really important things just in our own state, in our own city. And a lot of the fossil fuel comes from our construction industry. And there are a lot of standards now about trying to be much better about how we use fossil fuels in our energy codes. So next slide. So some challenges. We withdrew from the Paris Accords a couple years back under this administration. Now there are 195 nations still managed. We didn't participate in the COP30. The COP30 is the Committee on Parties. They meet every year trying to assess where we are in terms of climate change. There's been recent legislation that I don't think is very helpful about reducing or eliminating clean energy. The EPA, NOAA, FEMA, National Weather Service, all the workforce and budgets have been really significantly slashed. Thousands of scientists have been discharged. In my judgment, not the right trend because we need these scientists. We need these agencies to be working effectively. So hopefully that will change, but that's the current status. Next slide. So where's Rotary? This- Many of you probably know this, but maybe not all, but back 6 years ago, the trustees of Rotary decided to add issues about climate and environment as one of the 7 causes of focus areas. Like Jan mentioned, water, literacy, women empowerment. Now, as of 6 years ago, Rotarians are committed to an effort to address the causes and reduce the effects of climate change and environmental degradation. So a huge thing. And it's amazing. I've been kind of keeping track of Rotary clubs around the world. It's amazing how many Rotary clubs are involved. Over 10,000 are involved in environmental projects. That's about a third of all the Rotary clubs in the world. So Rotarians are acting in their communities. Next slide. These are just some of the things. Haiti is working on solar and wind power. The Taipei Club, regenerative agriculture, reducing pesticides. Reforestation is a big issue around the world. Madagascar is doing that. Colombia is working on reducing organic food waste. There's a lot of issues about whether or not we have too much meat consumption. Anyway, so that's what some Rotarians are doing locally. And I'll show you what we're doing locally. I mean, that's globally. What are we doing locally? Next slide. So a big issue with Rotary and in the world is this wildlife habitat preserving rainforests. And we need those rainforests because those rainforests pull out the CO2 out of the atmosphere. We really need to continue. There's some nonprofits that are planning to plant over 1 billion trees in the next 3 years, which will really help. It's all very positive. And our district has been involved in some tree planting. Next slide. So locally, we have our district 5030 environmental sustainability. It's in the lower right corner. We've been doing work with lithium battery recycling, the Duwamish River cleanup, and I know some of members here were participating in that, trying to be an advocate for following what's going on with Washington legislation. As far as I know, 10 Rotary clubs have a formal environmental sustainability committee, and our club, my club, which is the University District Rotary, has done several projects with Duwamish River. Lake Forest Park is working on pollination and bee habitat, which is really a very exciting project. Bellevue Rotary has championed lithium battery recycling. And the Environmental Rotary Club of Puget Sound, which sadly is dissolving, has done a lot of projects, including an urban forest project called the Miyawaki Forest. Next slide. We're almost done here. So Lake Forest Park and their pollinator garden, doing good work. Next slide. Lithium battery campaign. This is Rotarians in Bellevue doing really good work. Next slide. And what can you do? Well, I know that Eric has been active for the last several years, Eric Christensen on the environmental sustainability for your club, doing really important work. Uh, there's so many projects that you can do: salmon restoration, pollination garden, tree planting. You can encourage the club to have members on our district ESC, which would be great. Schedule programs about the environment, which you're doing. Next slide. We had a Duwamish River a year ago. We had a service day on the Duwamish River. We had 45 Rotarians. Kathy Gibson joined us. Our DG Jeff Borick was there. We had a lot of good work removing species that was invasive and also planting indigenous plants, which is great. Next slide. These are some pictures from that day. It was a year ago. You can see Kathy in the lower right with Sten. I think Sten is on the gathering. Um, Next slide. June 5th, World Environment Day. That happens every year on June 5th. And the big issues, one of them in the last couple of years has been plastic, as plastic is, it's getting into it's getting into our rivers, into our oceans. They say that there are plasticides, and they call it plasticides. It's plastic that's been basically dissolved, and it's gotten into the food chain, fish and marine life and birds. And, they say all of us have some infinite percentage of pesticides in our system. That could be concerning. Next slide. Then we had a good meeting out in the field with the Boise Creek near Enumclaw. We had 35 Rotarians from 6 clubs doing restoration on the Boise Creek. And again, just another nice day in the service. I think we have a couple more slides. Here's some Rotarians on the Boise Creek project. Next slide. So if you take nothing from this presentation except maybe more awareness of how severe this tsunami of climate change is, think about taking something called the Bright Action. It's www.brightaction.com. Maybe write that down. It'll give you, it takes 10 to 15 minutes and it'll give you an idea of how are you using energy in your home. Are there ways you can minimize your energy use? And there are a lot of things that you'll learn from that are worthwhile for your business, for your own home. So that's one thing. You're educating yourself about climate change, talk with other people about it. And the little things really matter. Turning temps down at night, having a full dishwasher, flying a little bit less, getting an EV. I mean, there's just so many things. My wife and I have shared a car now for 11 years, and sometimes it's a little challenging, but we use Sound Transit a lot and we make it work. And it's also a cost saving. So I think that's the last slide, isn't it, Mary? Yeah. Okay, there's the next. So anyway, thank you for letting me join you today. I hope I've helped kind of connect the dots and happy to answer questions if there's time for questions.
Thanks, Dave. That was terrific. Appreciate the presentation and classic Joseph Campbell storytelling style where you introduce the dragon and then you provide solutions at the end. That was well done. We have a couple of questions and we only have about 4 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to try to get through these as quickly as we can. Jan started us out with, she read somewhere that they were installing manufactured coral reefs and wanted to know if you know anything about those and if you think those are helpful.
I don't know a lot, but Jan's right. They have created a system. I've heard out of Florida where they have manufactured coral reefs and they're actually attracting marine life and they're actually having some impact. So I hope that can get scaled to be more. So that is happening, and I know of it off the Florida coast. I don't know where else it's going on in the world, but it appears that preliminarily to be successful. Yeah, good question.
Okay, next is a short one from Kathy Williams. And how can individuals cut down on the production of methane?
You know, I don't know, Kathy. It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't been asked that before. I don't know what individuals can do. It's really, it's other than addressing it with, and lobbying it with your legislators, but it's coming from oil, natural gas processes. It's coming from feedlots. It's coming from um, the tundra, which is in Alaska and Siberia is melting. So it's releasing. I don't know what an individual can do. I don't think the methane from individual use is really very significant. It's from these other challenges. But you could be on a crusade to get more regulation of feedlots, for example. That would be one thing you could do, and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. That will definitely reduce methane gas.
Great, Dave. That's a really good segue into Dennis Williams Jr.'s question, and I'll condense it with apologies, Dennis. Um, I think really the question is how do we, as individuals, as voters, as Rotarians, apply pressure to our representatives to make sure that we're forcing those laws that are going to be made to protect us now and in the future?
Well, I can answer that two ways. One is, we have chairs of the environmental. We're very progressive in Washington State. on environmental legislation. So I would just say every year there's some key legislators who are leading the movement in Washington State and try to find out who they would be. But you're talking about the chairs of the Environmental Public Works Department. The other thing, I have been a donor and involved with an organization called Earth Justice. There's Earth Justice, there's the Natural Resource Defense Council, there's the Sierra Club. Those are organizations that are involved in major work to try to um, basically they're in a lot of litigation trying to protect our environment and trying to address climate change. So you might pick an organization to support, and then you'll get lots of information. And they have very interesting monthly webinars where you can get connected, and that might be one thing. But I've been with a couple of these for since the early 80s, so 30 years, and there's amazing work that's been done. So that might be a way to do it too.
Thanks. And I think we have time for one more question. And then, Dave, hopefully, if you're able to open up your chat, maybe there are a couple of things that you might be able to respond to
Sure.
after we're done here. So, Paul Spildenner, how will the fact that almost all developing countries now have shrinking populations impact various calculations when it comes to climate change and the impact of carbon? Won't less people mean less carbon emitted?
You know, I believe that's true to some extent. Here's a challenging reality. We have so much CO2 in the atmosphere right now, it will take hundreds, if not thousands of years to basically remove it from the environment. So you're right, less population will diminish the use of fossil fuels. What is challenging is that there's so much that's gone into the atmosphere already. We need to have technologies that basically are scaled that extract that CO2. That's really what we need to do, I think. That's something within our control. We have the technology, we just need to learn how to scale it. So I don't know if
Great.
that answers your question, but that'd be my view.
Thank you. And in the chat, we've got a couple more notes from people, some general comments, as well as a helpful link from Kathy Gibson, of course, which is the SRAG, Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. So if people are really want to do something as a Rotarian, that's a great way to do it. So Jan, over to you.
Good point, Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and thank you, Dave. As a thanks for your participation today, our club's foundation has provided 600 servings of healthy produce to those in need to harvest against hunger in your name. Thank
Thank
you
you.
again to those who donate, and that allows us to provide the support. I also want to thank REB Enterprises, Carl Benke, for their meeting support this year. Thanks to Bloodworks Northwest and the Westland Morris Group with Baird Private Wealth Management for their sponsorship support. If you or anyone you know wants to sponsor a program, let Mary know. At this time, I would like to invite Marcia Mutisi to tell us more about the work of Rotary Cares. For those of you who may not know, Marcia has led this committee for several years and deserves a huge, huge thanks from all of us. It's Rotary Cares that lets us know when one of our members needs assistance, a note of support, or even a ride to an event. Of course, I have to add that Marcia is also a Leadership Tomorrow graduate. Marcia, you're up.
Thank you so much. Yes, graduated class of 2025 from Leadership Tomorrow. Thank you, President Jan. And I just want to give a shout out to FEDFA, who was the founder of the Rotary Cares Committee and as the sole chairperson, and she led it for many years. So I wanted to share a little bit about what prompted me to step up when she asked, if there are others who would be interested in supporting. The importance of this committee is just for us to have a mechanism to check in on each other and check in on our well-being. And we're really looking in the future to make this more about supporting our members, even if you have a business need, because one thing I've found is I've been listening in, even as a previous um, board member, a lot of people leave because they can't connect, or they say, I didn't have the connections or things like that. But we're here to help with some of that. I mean, there's so many ways you really can connect at Rotary. But if so yeah, so I'll start going through my background with why I stepped up was really around, we had a member, Steve Crane. Some of you may remember Steve. He passed away in his residence by himself. He was disabled and he lived alone. And his son found Steve deceased in his residence. And I felt really bad. And you hear stories like that a lot. I have an aging mom. But those are things I felt, I would like to be able to help facilitate. And in these days of just a lot of mental health challenges and things like that, how do we stay connected and just keep a pulse on what's happening with our members? So that's where Rotary Cares comes in. And so I wanted to share this flow chart of sort of our process. Basically, we usually receive a care notice through email, word of mouth. Somebody will say, "Hey, I was just out walking with Jen, and she said, ouch," and and so do let me know. Reach out and let me know. Sometimes it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. There's a new baby in the family. Sometimes people post things on Facebook and we see them there. I don't always have all the Facebooks, but do let me know when things are happening with our community. And then usually I will confirm with the person, making sure that they're still in the club, because we really keep this service for our current members. Although we do extend to past members, again, when we have the people who are deceased or people who are no longer part of our club, sometimes we will still reach out as Rotarians. We want to do good things. So I usually log into our club runner and check if they are still a member, verify their details, and I'll contact the care recipient and just let them know, hey, I heard you went ouch at the bowling party. You know who you are. And is it okay if I share with the club? So I usually will confirm with the person that it's okay sharing the information, or that I saw that you posted you have a new baby. Is it okay if I share with the club? And it's okay to say no. So no, there's no obligation here. Some people will say no, at this time I'd rather not. And so that's also okay. But if somebody approves, I then go through and prepare to send the email using our Club Runner email service. And again, that's, uh, you know, uh, based on the fact if they did say yes. If not, then usually I just send an email to the club, let everybody know with an action item, usually to say, hey, please, can we send cards on this email, or if somebody's okay to receive calls. If it's a situation where we've actually facilitated a blood drive in the past, or there was one organized and we were able to share information that there was a blood drive going on for a member's spouse who needed that. So there are many ways that people can then get involved. And so I will usually provide an action item to say, please send cards, please reach out. Our new members, usually it's nice to just send a note and let them know, maybe a short blurb on your experience if you're an experienced Rotarian, for those that are just joining. So there are many ways that you can be part of this CARES committee. Ashley Berman, I don't know if she's on the call, but she's also joining as a co-chair. She's just onboarding. So she will be also helping with this process. But that's about it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to help. There's, really nothing that I would say do not contact. But really, if you're a parent, I'm a single mom, and if somebody has a need for childcare, an emergency, and things that maybe others might have information on, a quick help, or I'm a gardener. I'm thinking of Dave. I'm like, I want to reach out. I actually helped run the community garden program in Tacoma. So now I'm like, I've got a point to catch up with Dave and ways that we can expand our community garden program and things like that. But that's all ways that we can help facilitate. And for those of us going to Taipei, it would be good again to connect. And I'm just an email away to reach out and let me know if there ways that we can just keep in touch. If there are any messages and pictures we can be sending, there are other mechanisms, but even through the CARES, we can also help facilitate that. That's all I have. If there are any questions, I can just take a quick 1 or 2 questions since we have a little bit of time. But if we have no time, that's also okay.
I do not see any
I
hands raised.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, but Marcia, I do see some complimentary comments. So thank you so much
Jim
for the
Moore
work that
has
you're
his
doing.
hand up. Jim Moore?
Yeah, I just
Go for
want
it, Jim.
to comment on what a good job Marcia is doing with the Rotary Cares notices. And that's allowed us to follow up on several of our members in real time, which is very helpful. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Jim. And the hard part about this, usually you find out about special people who've been swimming and having an emergency, and then you panic and have to compose yourself. And that was the issue with Jim. And I just was very happy that we had a good outcome from that experience. But thank you. Yeah, again, reach out. Let's use our service. And thank you, everyone. Take care. That's my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcia. We really appreciate your service. It's been invaluable to us. David B., do you have any announcements for us?
We do, Jan. Thanks very much. So a couple of things. Wednesday, June 3rd, lunch meeting at the WAC. So June wraps up for Jan's year with our Healthy Communities themed month. Join us back at the WAC on June 3rd for our penultimate meeting of the year. Our speaker will be Leonard Garfield, Executive Director of MOHI, which has been part of Seattle's community since 1952. Thursday, June 11th, the President's Party at Queen City Yacht Club from 5 to 8. Send off the Rotary Year in style at our annual President's Party back at Queen City Yacht Club again this year. We're going to be honoring outgoing club president Jan, of course, as well as outgoing SRSF president Lillian Sherman. We also want to recognize club leaders that have helped out throughout the year. RSVP link is up on the club website now. Please find it. Please use it so that we do know how many people are going to be attending. And then finally, on Wednesday, June 17th, lunch meeting at the WAC and the final meeting of the year with Lou Rochelle Brim Atkins. Join us before we go on break at our last meeting of the year following social and community activist featuring social and community activist Lou Rochelle Brim Atkins. The meeting will also feature our passing of the gavel ceremony, ushering in the start of the 26-27 Rotary Year under the leadership of our incoming club president, John Steckler. Jan, that's it for the announcements. Back over to you.
Thank you, David. As we close out today's program, I keep coming back to a simple idea. Environmental sustainability isn't just about driving less or recycling more. Those things matter, but at its core, it's really about stewardship. It's about recognizing that the resources we enjoy today are not simply ours to consume, they're ours to protect, improve, and pass along. I think it's a little bit like that old Boy Scout motto that my grandfather used to teach us about leaving the campsite better than the way you found it. Rotary has always operated with that kind of mindset. Whether we're helping bring clean water to communities, supporting education, or improving health outcomes, we're really doing the same thing, trying to leave things in a better state than they were when we found them. I was struck by something in Dave's message, the reminder that many of the decisions we make today are not going to show their full impact for decades. That can feel really daunting. It does to me. We live in a world that often rewards quick fixes and immediate results. But some of the most important work is exactly the opposite. planting a tree, restoring a watershed, protecting a resource, strengthening a community, these are acts of faith in the future. Some of you know that my personal email signature contains an old quote which says, "Leaders plant shade trees under which they will never sit." Whether or not we're talking about actual trees, that feels very much like the Rotary motto of service above self. The communities we inherit were shaped by the people who cared enough to think beyond themselves. Our responsibility and our opportunity is to do the same for the next generation. Thank you again, Dave, for helping us think more broadly about the role each of us can play. And thank you all for being a part of that work. I hope to see you all next week when we have the chance to hear from Leonard Garfield and focus on building healthy communities and servant leadership as we move into the future. We are adjourned. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Jan.